All right, time for another Policing with Pride. We're going to talk cybercrimes unit this time, a nationally known unit here for Plain Police. We're joined by two members of it, two detectives, Brandon Stiggy and Doug Moeller, to talk more about the unit. First of all, let's start off. How'd you get into policing? Is this something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, I was somewhat interested. I worked at Foot Locker, and it seemed like the most logical transition is from shoe salesman to police officer. Actually, there's really not a big difference between a salesman and a police officer.
Let me guess, you were at Athlete's Foot, and you were working there.
I was not.
Okay, what were you doing?
Finish line.
I joined the Army National Guard when I was in high school. Went through there. Ended up deploying in 2003, Kosovo. There's some other law enforcement officers that were in our unit and deployed with, and sounded interesting. Made the transition, came back, and then started pursuing law enforcement.
You go into your career, and there's a lot of great units and a lot of different things. What drew you to cybercrime?
I was the first one that kind of stood up the unit, I guess, by default. We just didn't have the appropriate response for cybercrime at the police department. I mean, we were relatively a small department, and we still are, but almost every facet of every crime or violation that we deal with has some sort of cyber component. And I think we recognized as an administration and as an investigations unit that we didn't have the proper tools, techniques, training, or methodologies to handle the influx of technology and crimes with technology. So we do online scanning, we do peer-to-peer networks where we're actually downloading illegal and malicious content from individuals and identifying that way. So that is one technique that we use as law enforcement to be proactive.
If you were going to recommend to people to be more secure with their network or their internet or their email, what would you recommend?
If it looks suspicious, it is. If it's something that's too good to be true, it's more likely too good to be true. And if you have any suspicion, then call somebody and check it out.
Personal identifying information or PII is important, but that's only one facet of the long algorithm that they're trying to secure funds for them or someone else that is involved in their criminal activity. The FBI task force that I work on is a cybercrime task force. Before that, I worked on the child exploitation or violent crimes against children task force for 7 years. So yes, outside agencies come to us quite frequently, and that really does come down to probably a combination of maybe some expertise, but also resources and technical capabilities that we have. And large part is due to our administrative support, because technology is expensive. In the long scheme of things, when you think about technology, about 6 months is shelf life. So after 6 months, whatever you have or whatever technique you're using is probably stale. So we have the ATF. They come and they ask our police department to go through devices. Obviously, the FBI does the same thing. And then outside agencies, Douglas County, they ask for assistance, La Vista, Ralston, Washington County, like any other surrounding communities, we make a very, very conscious effort to never say no.
In terms of harassment and stuff, how many of those types of cases do you see coming to your office?
So those will come through occasionally, a lot on Snapchat. Someone is making threats or some sort of veiled statement that occurs over that. And it's like everything else, it kind of comes and goes with the weather.
You worry about what your kids can have. You mentioned Snapchat. I hear about some bullying on there. If you were going to give advice to a parent, are any of those safer than the others in terms of the social media types of apps like that?
They can be done safely as long as the parent has an understanding as far as what that app is and how it works. And a parent just needs to not be afraid to take a device away from a kid and check up on them, just like you go in, check and make sure that their room is clean. Pick up their cell phone and look through their apps and make sure that the behavior that you're seeing on there is appropriate for you and you're in agreement with it.
There's over 1,200 that come out every week, right? So at the end of the day, are they going to go through every single application and find out what it can and can't do? No, but I would suggest that parents be well versed in the apps that are on your kids' phones and try to do some research. And the easiest way to do that is on Android, you go to the Google Play Store and you read about it. Like, it's right there. Or with Apple, you go to the App Store and it'll tell you exactly what it does. It looks like it would be an application that you would use on an everyday basis, like a calculator. And there's little nuanced things that you can identify by like a little plus or like an ad down at the bottom that shows on that calculator. It still works like a calculator, but then you can open it up and store, files that you don't want other people to see
Sure.
or prying eyes.
If you're going to look ahead kind of and think, okay, what do I want to change, or what do we need to do more to be able to fight this?
It definitely is a cat and mouse game, and the stuff we use is very expensive. So the forensic software we run has a yearly license that has a price tag to it, and our administration has to make a decision as far as, okay, what can we afford on that? And it's one of those deals where you can't have fast enough hardware or software that is able to perform well enough.
You'd like to see the ability to get more grants or that kind of federal funds to be able to help out too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a case that you can think of since you've been doing this that kind of stands out more than another?
One of them happened in Lincoln, and this was a case when I was working violent crimes against children, and we were able to identify an individual that was working at a daycare, and unfortunately he was assaulting young children for a long period of time. And it was a case that I worked that after a 4.5 hour interview, we had a full confession, and he was sentenced just last year to 100 years, and he's 26 years old. And so we worked that for almost 2 months, just kind of every day straight. We were working on weekends and nights and holidays just to try to make sure that we had everything identified and every person was kind of accounted for. So that was a pretty good case that I think everybody went home feeling a little bit better about, knowing that tomorrow nobody's going to be victimized. So
How do you turn off?
I don't know that you necessarily, I wish there was like a magic switch, especially when you're talking violent crimes against children. Those are things that I think you just have to compartmentalize and realize that you're dealing with kind of that 1% of society and not everybody. I think that's a struggle for most people that work in this profession. We had a case where there's 330 terabytes in a personal home. Where do you store? Because we have to store all of that evidence, and so they have to be on secure servers where nobody else can have access but Doug and I. And so that's a struggle that is literally daily ongoing. Yeah.
I always end with this. What does policing with pride mean to you?
Being able to put a full effort into the job, being able to make sure at the end of the day that if that was someone in my family that called, that I handled it to a degree that they would be happy with.
Over the years, I've learned that there's a kind of a mislabel about police officers that we're very interested in, obviously, the end component of the judicial system where they're getting punished for something, but I think we're equally as concerned about the protection part of our job as we are about the judicial side where we're putting somebody in jail. And I have just as high ambitions about exonerating somebody or making sure that that person is innocent as I do about finding someone who has actually committed a criminal violation.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Yeah.